Aho, bonjour Indinoy Maganadok, Anin, Kaagegaabaw and Dijinakas, Mikanak and Dudim, Mikanak Wajawing and Dunjaba, Beshoga Kabakong and Danongong, Apijigo Migwich Bizindawieg. And what I said there was a traditional Ojibwe protocol greeting. I said, hello, all of my relatives. My name is Kaagegaabaw. I'm Turtle Clan. I'm a descendant of Turtle Mountain. I live close to Minneapolis today, and I wanted to take a moment and say, Apijigo Migwich Bizindawieg. Thank you all so much for tuning in and listening. Most of today's talk will be based on this incredibly brilliant article that one of my former professors wrote. Professor Paybama Benes, Professor Dennis Jones, he wrote an article on the etymology of the word Anishinaabe, where he had a number of brilliant insights on what that word means. And so one of the first ones, I think, would be like human being. I think a modern contemporary meaning of that word would be an indigenous person, but I think the pre-contact meaning of that word is human being. And one of the first examples that Professor Paybama Benes used came from Eddie Benton Benet, the late Eddie Benton Benet. It came from Ani, from whence, Anissa, to descend, and Abe was the being. And this is the person who's coming from the stars, from the Buganegijik, from the hole in the day. And that's really what that word means, Buganegijik. It is a constellation of stars. And it's said that this is where the first human being descends through and is put on the earth, Anishinaabe, the original man, the original person, the original human being. And when you look at the origin story, the very origin of humanity is embedded in that word, is embedded in that particular etymology. From whence descended the first being. So that's one etymology, and there are a number of them. And here's the thing with etymologies. I think they're all true. I think it's a brilliant strategy for a people with a very complex and sophisticated language and a very detailed oral history to embed a number of teachings in one place, in one word, so that if you reached a point in your life where you begin asking yourself, well, what does it mean to be a human being? What is a part of that? What part am I playing in that? The next one came from Nij. Our Ojibwe word for the number 2 is Nij. And so Anishinaabe, this would mean the second people. This is a reference to after the Great Flood. And we have a flood story here in Mikanako-Minising, here on Turtle Island, where there's a giant flood that it's a catastrophic, world-changing event. You know, if you look at the oral history, this is most likely when the Great Mountain of Ice during the last ice age has melted, and all of a sudden an ice dam gives way and floods with quadrillions of gallons of water, you know, most of the northern part of Mikanako-Minising of Turtle Island, what we call now North America. And so the Anishinaabe would be the second people, the people who lived after the flood. And so here we have our people's history embedded in that, here on Turtle Island. Another one comes from Onijishi. Onijishin in the Ojibwe language means it's good, it's beautiful. This would mean the beautiful people, the good people, the people who are seeking a good life, Menobumatsuin, living a life with Zakiitduin, with compassionate, unconditional love for one another, with Debwewin, with truth, with Gwakwadizuin, with virtue, with righteousness, with honesty, with Dabasendizuin, with humility, with manaji itiwan, with respect for one another, acknowledging the sanctity, the sacredness of each other's lives, with zungide ewan, with strength of heart, with courage, with bravery, as well as with nibwakawan, with intelligence, with wisdom. Those people who were seeking out the good life in this word for Anishin, Anishinaabe, the good people, the beautiful people, that's how they were described. One seeking out a life like that would be described as being beautiful, as being good. These next two are actually in my book, the Seven Generations and the Seven Grandfather Teachings, where it has this word part, Anisha, for nothing, for no reason. And what this is really discussing is Anishinaabe. And this teaching, it really goes back to one of our most ancient ceremonies, the Gi'igoshamoin, the vision quest, fasting. This is where Anishinaabe, a human being, would seek out solitude in the woods, on a mountain, maybe on an island. For some people, they'll do this for 4 days and 3 nights. They'll go without food, water, and in isolation as they as they seek out a dream, as they seek out a vision. And while you're fasting, you've negated all of these things that you absolutely need to live: water, clothing, shelter, and food. And you realize that a human being without food, water, clothing, or shelter will die. You will die without these basic core human needs being met. And so when they're using this term, Anisha, they've realized something very important. One, they have relationship to all of the beings that are feeding them, that are clothing them, that are sheltering them, that are giving them food. They have relationship to all of them. And it is that relationship that makes them relatives. So when you greet people like "Bonjour, Windenoy Magrandok," hello, all of my relatives, you're not just speaking to your fellow human beings. You're not just speaking to someone who you have a DNA relationship to. You are addressing the entire world because you have a relationship with all of these beings. And it's that relationship that has made them relatives to you. So when we imply that in the teaching Anishinaabe, it is from the Nigagunsaminakaning, the Red Gut Reserve in northwestern Ontario. This is the one who is nothing without the Creator, the one who is nothing without his or her relatives. In the Onegaming Lake of the Woods area, this is the one who is humble before the Creator. And I mentioned that word humble already in today's talk. Humility in Ojibwe, it's Dabasing Dizo. It's one of our grandfather teachings, Gichi Debak Konegewin, of our great laws, the sacred law. One of those teachings that shows us how to lead a good life, life of peace, life of balance, life without conflict or contradiction. And when we look at what that word really means, Dabasing Dizo, it has in it Dabas, lo. Ain is to think, and Dizo is of oneself. And Dabasing Dis, I think lowly of myself. And it's not really low self-esteem. What Anishinaabe is saying here is that I am not more important than all of my relatives. In fact, I cannot live without my relatives. And because I can't live without them, I'm nothing without them. I'm inextricably interconnected to them. And my actions will affect them, and their actions will affect me. Therefore, I think humility is acknowledging that I am all of my relatives. I don't exalt myself above all of my relatives. I am all of my relatives. I think that's an incredibly important teaching as a human being today, to maintain that sort of humility. to really embrace that in seeking out a good life. And then when someone asks, well, what is it to lead a good life or what is it to be a good person? I think humility definitely has to be there. Yeah, why I wanted to talk about this word is we live in a society of division right now. Rather than stating that I am all of my relatives and all of my relatives are me, I see this so often that it is we separate ourselves into camps. We these could be economic, these could be social, these could be spiritual, these could be political camps, designations, separations. And for me, as I was looking at this word in Anishinaabe, you know, again, a more contemporary meaning of this word could mean an indigenous person, but I think its pre contact meaning was human being, a human being. Out of all of these relatives that we have, the trees, the birds, the mushkiki, the medicines, the strength of the earth, the plants, the Wasiug, the four-legged. Out of all of those beings, we're all interconnected, we're all related, and we're not more important than them. We are all of them. And we're the people. We're simply put the people. And I like that with that humility that we're not more important than everyone. In fact, we can't live without them. And I think when we begin treating one another as we're seeking out a good life, as we're seeking out to be truly human, then it must be a way that we should be able to seek out those teachings of the good life. When we look at a pre-contact meaning of that word, Anishinaabe, meaning human being, to say someone who wasn't a member of your tribe, someone who didn't speak your language was literally Mayagi Anishinaabe, someone who sounds different, someone who speaks a different language, may have a different culture. Still human being. And for me, as I'm looking for direction on how to navigate this day and age with so many separations, with so many divisions, it is really to be a human, to acknowledge that my relatives are like me. I'm not more important than them. And that when I treat all of my relatives, when I treat my fellow human beings, as well as treating the environment, I try to do that with a great deal of love, with the Zakiyatiwan. And I'm doing it with truth, that I'm speaking from my heart, that I'm speaking from the very center and core of my being. I'm leading a life honestly with Kwakwadizawan, where it's a holistic life, where my words are in alignment with my actions. With Manajiatuan, with respect, where I'm acknowledging the sacredness, the sanctity of my relatives' lives. Being a human being or other than human. Of course, that humility has to be there, the strength of heart, the bravery and courage to do that in a day and age where it is so easy to get into another camp, be it political, spiritual, economic, or political, and look at someone else as being different rather than a relative. You'll need strength of heart to be able to treat them as a relative as well. And knowing that if I do that, I'll act in a way that is positively beneficial for all of my relatives. A way that's positively beneficial for all of my relatives, not just who exist now, but someone who will exist 7 generations from now. I'll have treated them in a good way. I want to take a moment and say, Pichiko Miigwech Bizendawi. Thank you all so much for tuning in and listening this afternoon. I want to say, Dagasai Ngwamazi, please, all of you, do take care. And Banama Minawara Sabandamangigo Bandaman. And the special aside, we see each other again. Miigwech.